This is the stage we're at with the waistcoat. So I've sewn all of the bias binding on, but this main piece I haven't yet done my top stitching on, and that's because we need to decide where we want to put the straps, how many we want to do, and I've decided I want to do 3 fasteners like this, equidistant down the front, and I've decided I want them to be 20 centimeters long each. So I'm going to cut my fastenings to 22 centimeters. So whatever length that I want them to be, I'm going to add 2 centimeters on as a seam allowance. So I'm going to cut 6 lengths at 22 centimeters. I'm now going to pin the fastening so I can sew them together. So it's going to look like this. And the way that I do it is we open out the bias binding at one end, fold it down by 1/2 centimeter, fold in the 2 sides along the existing fold lines, and then fold the whole thing in half. Like so. So you can see it's really nicely sealed in, and I'm going to secure that just with a clip, and then the rest of it I'm just going to fold in half all the way down, and we're going to do a top stitch just along this edge to hold it in place. And you can leave this edge raw as we're going to fold this into the bias binding that we've already sewn onto the waistcoat. So to show you one more time how to do that end, as it can be slightly fiddly, is you open it out, fold down by 1/2 centimeter, fold the 2 sides in following the existing folds, and then finally fold the whole thing in half to sandwich all of those folds inside like this, and pin it down. And I'm going to repeat that for all of these, and then we're going to sew these together. So this is how you sew the fasteners together. So I'm going to remove the end clip that I put on, and I'm going to aim to do a forward and back down this end, then do a 90-degree turn and continue a top stitch all the way down one edge of the fastener. This can be a bit fiddly just as it's such a small piece, so take your time. It might take a couple of practices, but that's okay. So I will feed this under my foot and manually move the needle down just to check it's going to land exactly where I want it. So this looks good, and then I'm going to again do some manual sewing just so I have as much control as I can, and I'll do some reverse stitches, a couple more, and now I know I've sealed in that end. And I'll leave the needle inside the fastener but lift the presser foot so I can turn this now by 90 degrees and take the next clip out, put my presser foot back down, and I'm going to continue to do a top stitch all the way along the edge of the fastener. So this is the level of finish that you're aiming for. I've got some nice vertical stitches along this edge, and then a nice parallel line all the way down the edge of the fastener. The next thing to do is to decide where you'd like to attach your fasteners. So I've just pinned on these 2 at the top because I know I want one closer at the top, and I'm going to have 2 more sets, and I think I want the bottom one to be just kind of where my natural waist sits. So I'm just going to clip that on so I can get a feel of what it would be like. And then when I take this off, I'm going to mark these 2 points and measure into the middle of the 2 so I know where I'm going to put my 3rd one. I'll then match those measurements on the other side. I've taken the waistcoat off so I can make these markings. So I know I want this one right at the top, and I'm going to measure the distance from this top one to the top of this clip here. So mine is 29 centimeters, so I'm going to take that clip off and just put a small mark on the inside of the bias binding at 29 centimeters.
I want my middle fastener to be halfway between the 2, so I'll put it at 14.5 centimeters.
And I'll mirror that on the other side. So I've turned the waistcoat inside out and I want to pin down this bias binding so I can top stitch it. So I'm going to start that as usual and just fold it slightly over like so. And when I come across this point here, which is where I want to attach one of my fastenings, what I'm going to do is catch this on the inside. So I'm going to line up the top of the fastening, so I've got the stitching at the bottom. So the top of the fastening in line with the top of that mark, and then I'm going to catch it in that direction and fold it once more back over itself in this direction. So I've caught it on this way and then on that way as well. So it's sandwiched either side of the white bias binding, and I'm going to catch that with my clip, and I will do the next one down just to demonstrate again. So I'll continue in between those points as usual, and as soon as I get to a point where I want to attach a fastening, I will turn it this way around so my stitching is at the bottom. I'll align the top of the fastener with this mark and I will catch that inside of my bias binding. So I'm putting my bias binding down and then covering it over with the binding. And then I'm going to fold this back on itself in this direction. So it's basically going to be sewn over twice. So it's just super secure. And I'll hold that in place with a clip. I'll then continue round as normal, including sorting out my corners. And if you need to jog your memory on the corners, I'd recommend just going back to watch that section specifically to make sure your corners are going to end up super crisp.
Pin all the way around the edge of the waistcoat and then take it back over to the sewing machine for the final top stitch. This is what the top stitching will look like where you've attached your fasteners. If it didn't work perfectly first time, don't worry, you can always unpick it and have another go.